we can go on to the next one. And then, this really seems like a question for you, but I've been doing a little bit of learning here about Jade lizards the last few days. So why don't you ask this of me? Let's see what I know.
Let's see what you got here. A Jade lizard eliminates upside risk entirely while still collecting a credit, which means the risk profile is completely asymmetric. What does that asymmetry actually do to your expected value versus a strangle? And when does the math differ one over the other?
Well, I don't think we want to confuse no upside risk with free money, right? And that's what a lot of traders think initially when they go into positions like this. Yes, you are eliminating the naked call tail risk, but we are paying for that by giving the upside credit and concentrating the risk on the downside, if I understand this correctly here, because this is your Jade Lizard trade after all. But versus a typical strangle, a Jade Lizard then usually has a prior probability of profit because you can't lose the upside if you structure it for a net credit greater than the call spread width. But the expected value is not the same as probability of profit. Right. That's the trap that a lot of traders fall into.
And that is very well said. And it says, when does the math favor one over the other? I mean, strangles are great. Strangles have their time and their place. They truly do. But as far as the math goes, and I'm using math as the research from the past, right? So yeah. You're looking at, and they've done study after study. They used SPY, they used IWM, they used GLD. And on the road one year, I asked for a 10-year back test for all those that have dollar-wide strikes. That it was easy to do. Whether it behooves you to mechanically each day do a strangle or a Jade lizard. And the Jade lizard won time and time again because of the fact that the risk profile is, you don't make any money to the upside in that, but you don't lose. And that actually turned the math in the favor of the Jade lizard. And that was studies that have been done over years and years and years. So you want skew as rich on the put side then? Well, all of those, the ones that they studied had normal skew, right? So a Jade lizard makes no sense in something with call skew, because then what you're doing is you're buying the option with the most expensive call on the board. The Jade lizard works with regular skew, meaning that the puts have a higher volatility than the calls as you go up. So the Jade lizard does take advantage of volatility skew in the normal fashion. Now, these were also created well before you had all these products that have crazy call skew, right? So you have to take that into account as well. But those were the ones. It was GLD, SPY, IWM, DIA, and I want to say something else, but something that had dollar-wide strikes. That's when it makes sense, when you have like a regular skew.
Do you do this when IV is high or low? Is usually a follow-on question that we have. And we talked about this a bit last week, but you never know who was listening.
Well, so if you're selling premium, it's a premium selling strategy. So you want high implied volatility. But when you think about it, you're going to get a lot farther with high implied volatility. If you've got a low IV, I'm not going to do a premium selling strategy. Strangles and Jade lizards have the same principles in the fact that they're both selling premium. When you've got a very low IV, I change my strategy into something else.
Right. So from my understanding, and I'm starting to dabble with this, it's not in the follow page yet because I want to make a fool of myself here. But once I get my hands on this, because I'm trying to incorporate some of these new strategies into how I express myself, particularly when it comes to single stocks. The indexes, I feel like I've got down pat and how I operate around them. I've noticed that when I try to bring some of my futures index strategies over to single stocks, you know what? It's not always working out the right way here. So, looking at this, for me, my first blush here, I want vol that's overpriced because I don't want to deal with gap risk, so that the credit received is enough to absorb any gap risk, particularly in the short term. So Liz, I have some learning to do here with the Jade lizards, as it were. Jade lizards, zebras. I'm going to go through the whole zoo here at tastylive.
Yeah,
one of these days.
Welcome to the jungle.
Welcome to the jungle. Liz, let's go to the next question. When the VIX curve flips into backwardation versus sitting into Contango, should that actually change which expiration you are selling, or is that a futures market signal that doesn't translate into equity options the way people think?
I'm going to toss this to you. This is your wheelhouse, your futures options.
I actually expect. This is a really actually good question because it tests your intuition as a trader. When I find the market sitting into backwardation, no, it does translate into equity options the way that people think. I mean, you see in the short term, when you get that backwardation in the VIX curve, particularly in like ES or NQ, it causes a lot of that single stock risk to spill over. The indexes can have this situation where you have like a lot of low index volatility, but then high volatility in the single stock names. But rare is the occasion where you have high index vol and low single stock volatility. That's pretty rare.
I don't know that I've ever seen that, to be honest with you.
I'm saying I'm not going to say it never happens. I'm thinking of like Jessica Chastain in Zero Dark 30, where she says, I know you guys don't like 100%, so I'm going to say 95%.
There you
But
go.
like, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I can't say that it's never happened before. So
Yeah.
yes, if you see that futures market volatility and ES or NQ flips from contango into backwardation, that usually is a bad omen for single stocks. Single stocks flipping into like a Microsoft or an Amazon, that could be idiosyncratic or sector specific, and you may not be able to get a read on what's happening in the broader market that way.
Yeah. No, but it is true. So keep an eye on the volatility. And I know the boys in the morning, so and I use boys loosely. I apologize for that. But so Mike and Jamal have been keeping an eye on that as well with just the VIX curve, right? And I mean, Mike really hangs his hat on the fact that that is a precursor to what the market is going to do. Now, but we've seen it flip back immediately. You can kind of see it flatten or steepen as the market is moving. So to me, I look at this kind of like when you just kind of break it down into something a little bit simpler. Call skew, right? So if you see a call skew in a single name product, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going up, but it does mean there are more people buying calls than selling calls. So it's kind of a different way to look at it. That doesn't mean the stock price is going up. It just means that they're increasing the implied volatility in those, saying that it could possibly happen. The risk is there. So the VIX and the volatility curve are good measures to look at and understand, but there is no X plus Y equals Z with when the curve backwards and forwards.
Right,
So,
and if you were looking at the volatility curve this year, for most of this year, we've had some fairly steep contango in VIX futures.
yeah.
Or if you look at ES or NQ, and if you were using that as a guidepost for how to trade Microsoft or Meta or Oracle, you'd probably be out on your butt right now. So it's not one for one. You can use them to help make informed decisions, but not for single stocks all the time.
But you know what though, Chris? Everybody seems to want to know, and I get it. I get it because I've got two kids that are getting into this, and they're just like, tell me what it is, tell me what this means, and you just kind of need to understand everything as a whole. Volatility is part of the picture; it's not the entire picture, right? You use it to make decisions. You use volatility to make decisions, and you don't try to fight the volatility. That's the one thing that I keep saying. We talked about this with toddlers. You have to take what you're given. Your kids have two different personalities. You can't try to raise your son the way that you raise your daughter because they're different. So you need to understand like the basic principles behind it, but don't fight what they're giving you.
I love that. Identify the market conditions, choose the correct strategy.
Yeah, and look at them as a big.
I'm talking about parenting, of course.
Yeah. But everything's got like a small piece into it. It's just not the whole picture. Volatility isn't the whole picture.
Before we get to the last question, just a quick check on markets. S&P 7460 up 0.8%. The Nasdaq up 1.15% here. A little bit of a meander since we started the show. Can't say we've done really much of anything for the past 30 minutes at this point in time. But European session has ended. Liquidity's coming out. It's a holiday week. Volumes here are actually fairly meaty today. 819,000 contracts traded in ES so far. We still have 4.5 hours of trading to go, Liz. So that's not too terrible.
So
Sure,
you
go.
mentioned one thing about the European markets closing. So what say you about when the European markets close? Because I think sometimes we get, the markets can shake out until the European markets close, in my opinion, and then it kind of levels off.
Depends what's happening in Europe. I mean, a lot of Europe recently, over the past, say, few years, you've been dealing with decent economic issues, political issues, and so once Europe closes, then U.S. stocks are kind of untethered and allowed to go up. More recently, that hasn't been the case because a lot of the gains that we've seen in the market have come overnight, but particularly in the Asian session, where you look to Korea and Japan and China, and a lot of this is AI trade related. So Europe, to me, has been just an albatross. I don't necessarily view the European close as a bad thing. Most days it's like, finally, we don't need to worry about Europe. We can focus on America again and our air conditioning.
Yes, because it is right about now. Doesn't it close now?
Just about 6 minutes.
Yeah, 6 minutes. Okay.
Laura, we have one more question here before we wind down this show. This feels like a question for me. Why don't you take this one?
It does. This is for sure got your name written all over it. The 2-year yield hit a 52-week high last week. The dollar has been strengthening, and oil just repriced on the Iran deal. How does that cross-asset picture factor into where you want to be positioned in options right now? Take it away, Fred.
Yeah, so last week we were talking about the 2-year yield and how it kind of leads what the Fed is going to do. You can use it as a market-derived measure of Fed expectations in a sense. And so when you see that we have oil coming in, the 2-year yield going up, and a stronger U.S. dollar, this is probably not an environment where you want to be blindly short volatility across the board, because oil being down to this degree is not a sell everything moment, but it also, oil going up is a problem for markets. How come it's coming back in and is not providing a big boon or benefit to a broad swath of assets? So when we have higher short-end yields and a stronger dollar, that can pressure duration. It can pressure valuations. Companies that are more rate sensitive, for example, smaller cap companies that don't have moats on their balance sheets, those are the ones whose value gets hit hardest and first. So perhaps there's a read-through here. Maybe we should be a little bit more discerning about what's happening, like the Russell or the RSP, the equal-weighted S&P 500. But in this environment, right, maybe I'm wrong here. We want to sell premium selectively. We want to define risk. Frequently, this is not buying naked calls or puts or selling naked calls or puts. And I think that we need to focus on the fact that given the overnight headlines, there's been a lot of gap risk, not just on the weekends, but over day to day, right? How many days recently, Liz, have we woken up to a SK Hynix or South Korea headline and their limit down there, and all of a sudden SMH is down 5 or 6% here, and then it reverses the next day? So I think that's perhaps one way to go about this in the thinner conditions during the summer with what's happening with the Fed. Avoid trading strategies that would leave you exposed to meaningful gap risk, particularly in tech stocks. And if you can do that, then you're able to survive on a day-to-day basis and keep that powder dry and try to find the opportunity for the next big trade.
Would you kind of look more towards the Russell in this environment then?
If rates are coming in, the Russell probably has more upside convexity in the short term, right? I mean, think about the structure of a balance sheet. When rates are high, there's basically no layer of no cushion whatsoever. Rates come down, all of a sudden margins scream higher. So residual income that pours over into equity, the equity was worth zero. Now there's a lot of money that can be poured over from retained earnings, right? So that equity shoots up first and faster. That's why the crap tends to rally, not the big names. Okay. Yeah. So we got to keep these relationships in mind. The Russell is not something I love here if we're talking about the Fed potentially raising rates. But, Ilya had a really good point. Kevin Warsh's task force probably mean the Fed has a 6-month runway to not actually enact any policy changes. And our SR3 contract back to 4%, not 4.25 for year end. I rest my case.
You heard it here first.
Liz, final word, and then we got to go to break.
I actually, looking at the close, we've rallied a little bit into it. I think we're gonna hold, and I'm a fan of Christmas in July. Is that what it's called? Christmas in July.
Christmas in July.
I'm a believer.
Christmas in July. Final 3 days of June. First 9 days of July. 2.5% gain on average over the past 40 years. What do you do with it? Market's going higher with it, but we'll be back later, of course. Tasty Live programming continues next after a brief break. We have Gus and Errol coming on here for the morning show. We'll see you there. Thanks, Liz.